really excited to have you join us today for our session 3 of our 4-part series, Advancing Community Development Strategic Steps Forward. Today, I will be presenting along with Jason Callahan. The two of us work in our community development consulting area and strategic financing services. I know that's a mouthful. Basically, what it means is we help organizations assess where they are and think about where they want to go and help them along that learning path. So, Jason, you want to introduce yourself briefly? I
Yeah,
know you'll be covering the last of the slides.
thanks, Laurel. Yeah, my name is Jason Callahan, and I serve as one of the senior managers for our strategic financing services practice. And I've spent the majority of my career in the tax credit investing and kind of community development space, working on affordable housing tax credits, new market tax credits, historic tax credit investments. And I am looking forward to speaking to you all today.
Thanks, Jason. Excited for us to be able to share some of the stuff we've learned along the way from helping clients and actually helping our own organizations. I come to Cherry Beckert from having been a lawyer in my past life and also leading a company. And some of the successes and failures I've learned along the way are those foundational elements we try to imbue with our help with clients. So today we're really talking about this idea of this life cycle. Raising, deploying, and managing capital is what we do as a team, but it's also what our clients are usually doing. Everybody has to raise money if they want to keep working and doing what they do. They have to then get that money out the door by either investing in services, jobs creation, or work in capital raising to build a new building. And then they have to manage that investment. So this is really for us on a new market tax credit platform, but also in other elements of raising capital. So community development block grant and other things. So we'll talk a little bit about that at the end of the session, but that's a little bit about who we are. One of the things we're really proud about is the fact that we've had an ability to help so many different clients across the country. So from Alaska to Puerto Rico and from New Jersey down to California, we have clients along the way around the country. And today I'm actually sitting in the Virginia Beach office here in Norfolk, Virginia area. Because we had an outreach session here in person. So we get out and see some of our clients across the country. And that's one of the things I'll talk about in a little bit. But this is some of our metrics. And we do have one more session coming up. And that session will be on September 25th. So if you're interested in thinking specifically about new market tax credit applications, we're going to have a session on that September 25th. So please feel free to scan that QR code if you want to register. And if you don't get fast enough out your phone, you can find us online. So you can definitely register for that last session. Let's jump into what we are going to talk about today. So some of the learning objectives we're going to cover really are: where do you get started? If you know you aren't really exactly where you want to go, or you're thinking to yourself, where should we be going as an organization? How do you get started? So really, frankly, if you want to go somewhere, you have to know where you are. So thinking about that as the first step is one of the elements, and we'll walk through doing that assessment, exploring strategies for how to implement your strategy, you're thinking about your correct strategy, and then the roadmap that you might want to develop. And then we'll end with some of the resources that you can use to help yourself get started, like new market tax credit allocations and others. I think we've given people enough time to get logged on and figure out how this all works. So let's start with a poll so that you guys can all get credit for spending your time here with us today. So polling question number 1 is: what type of organization are you representing? Are you a community development corporation, community development entity, a CDFI, a community loan fund, or you don't know what any of those are and you're something else all together? So just remember, there's no right or wrong answer. This is just one of those questions we ask to get to know you a little bit better. So we'll give you another couple of seconds to get your answers in. Do we have everybody reporting? We've got everybody answering. We will give the results. So it looks like a lot of other. So we either don't know what some of these things are, we aren't representing some of these organizations, or we're just thinking about what should we start with. We're at the very beginning. So that's all good answers, and that helps us know, sort of make sure that we defined all the terms we talk about today. So that's great. So as we get started, frankly, strategic planning for us, we don't just do strategic planning for any type of organization. We really think about strategic planning in the framework of community development. So frankly, the concepts are similar across all different types of planning, but this is really focused on that type of organization. So a lot of the tips we're going to have will be in that framework. But no matter what kind of plan you're trying to put together, you have to really think about, where are you? You have to set a process in place. You have to think about what you want to accomplish. Are you thinking about a 1 year, 3 year, a 5 year plan? Do you just have audacious goals and you don't really even have any idea how long those are going to take? At the beginning, you have to think about who's part of your team. So sometimes if you're starting a new organization, which a lot of you may be, since you had that answer of other, what is the team that you're going to play with? Who are you really going to be working with? Who should be on that team? That can be sort of that initial conversation of who should be within your group to do that planning. So you look at macro and micro level assessment of your team. Do you have the money? Do you have the capital? Do you have the people around the table? And then you can really start to get started. So if we think about that, the next slide will take us on that journey. One of the things that I noticed when I was in helping clients as a lawyer and also leading a team was, it really helps to become specific about our goals. To think about, where are we going really has to be defined. When you say, I'm going to go climb this mountain, and you look at that picture, and most people might see that mountain in the foreground and think, okay, let's go, let's get started. The question really becomes, is any mountain okay? Or am I climbing that mountain? Or do you see the mountain very far back in that foreground, in the background? Are we thinking about the foreground or the background, and how far along are we in our plan? So if we move to the next slide, this question really pops up with a lot of people. When you're deeply embedded within a community, you're usually thinking about what's needed in that community. When you're not deeply embedded in a community and you're thinking about a region, it really does matter for what you're going to talk about, this mountain or any mountain, because there may be lots of mountains that could be climbed, and you really have to get clear and specific about why you're doing what you're doing, what are you doing, and who again is going to go along with you on that journey. So I love to think about this in the visual aid of it, but I think the next slide will help us get more concrete and specific again. So at the very beginning of our process, I always like to lead people back to those great questions that we got taught in grade school, right? Who, what, when, where, why, and how. Think about this when you're talking about your plan. Who's going to be coming along on this journey? What tools do we need? If I'm really going to climb a mountain, I'm going to need more than just my clothes that I'm wearing now. These aren't very good mountain climbing clothes. I'm going to need special shoes. But whatever the journey is going to take us, we're going to need those special tools along the way to know that we can get all the way there, and we don't just get halfway there and find out we left something behind that's really important. When is the best time to get started? So again, if there are funding cycles and you get started right after the funding has just been released, do you have enough capital to get you to the next funding cycle? If you are just funded and you've gotten some money, what is the element that you have next on your list? If you don't even know what funding is available, when looking at what's available to go out and get, and who can help you along this journey is a great question to start with. So here are some of the core elements. Oh, we'll go back one, sorry. Here are the core elements. So thinking about a strategic plan, in my work, I often found that people love to plan, but then they don't really know how to take that plan off a page. So the first part is to really get that mission alignment, mission, vision, values. Who are you? How do you differentiate yourself from other companies doing this work? Where are you going to work? what are, again, who are those team members that are going to be with you along the way, and an organizational overview. So again, who's on your internal team, who's going to be on the day-to-day, and who are those special players that you just bring into the loop when you are thinking about certain elements of your plan. Then again, do that market analysis. Where are you located? What is your region? Who are you going to serve? And are you really needed? So one of the things that I'm reminded of regularly in plans that are done is that it matters when that plan was done, right? So I heard about an organization that was using a plan. They were going to put a grocery store somewhere. Well, that plan was several years old, and somebody else had that plan as well. They were started and they had a jump start. So if you put two grocery stores in a food desert, they're going to compete with each other and maybe both will fail. So think about, really, are your services necessary? How do you differentiate yourself from the people down the block? And is there enough need for your services to really warrant you doing this independently? And frankly, if somebody else is doing it down the block, especially when we're talking about community development, build that bridge. Think about how you might be different. Go down and see them, talk to them, and think about what they're doing and how you're going to do something that is actually helping their ecosystem thrive. Or are you really doing something that's so similar to what they're doing? Maybe you should reevaluate. Then again, when you've sort of set your foundation, this is when you sort of think to lift your head up and think about, where do you want to go within 1, 3, 5 years? How do you set that plan in motion? And once you've sort of made those audacious goals of, I'm going to climb that mountain, right? Then you sit there and think about the plan of action. Okay, we have to break that down a little bit. We have to put it back into the, what do I do first, second, third, and make sure that the team has that plan of action. They really understand it. One of the things that I am being here in Virginia noticed that a lot of times people don't put enough emphasis on getting into the room together, talking about these kinds of mission, vision, values, organizational overview together in a room. Make sure that you can get people to set aside that time and they can really put their efforts into this, putting everything else aside off of their plate. And then you can really get that synthesis of what you want to do together and go towards the same mountain together. Again, and measurement and evaluation is important. Where are you now? If you don't understand your data and how you're going to measure success, then how will you know when you've gotten somewhere? So it's like trying to go towards climbing something without really knowing where your trail is, knowing where your compass is and how you're going to sort of get your materials to climb that mountain. You have to understand where you are now, what metrics you're going to measure. Is it number of encounters? Is it quality or qualitative metric? You have to decide. So I think we are up to our second polling question now. So where are you in your organizational strategic planning process? Are you just at the very beginning? Do you need to define that mission, vision, and values for yourselves? Are you creating action plans? Are you establishing those metrics? Did you document your goals already? Or if there's another, you're welcome to add that to the chat and we'll have somebody take a look at that. Each step of this process is important, and sometimes you don't really know if you're new to sort of planning, you're new to setting up an organization. Sometimes you're not really clear about where you are in the process, so other is a perfectly good answer. Okay, we've got people in all steps and all stages. That's perfect. Some of you are at the very beginning, just thinking about who you want to be, what's the mission, vision, values you want to engender. And some of you are really at that end stage of documenting your goals and moving forward. And frankly, what I love about our visual about who we are as an organization is it's a circle. So these steps can be repeated, rinsed and repeated. So we'll move on after that. So again, we talk about fundamentals to know what direction we're all going to go and go together. It reminds me that as a community, really, when you're assessing that greater group of what each person wants or needs, that helps you to get in person. It helps you to understand where do where does everybody in that group think they are? You might not all be on the same page, but get on the same page as much as you can. And then where do you really think as a group you can go? And again, who else do you need to go and get? And then some of the things that Jason will be covering in the last part of our session are how do we close that financing gap? If we know where we are, we know where we want to go, but we really don't have the tools to get to where we want to go. How do we go out and get some of those tools before we get started? And then again, one of the things that I think is hard is for everybody to agree on how do you track and measure your success. One person may think, getting a job is the next part of their process. So if you bring in something that will bring jobs into that community, that may be a success for them. But if you're thinking that what somebody else really needs is education for the children in that community, then that may be where they're measuring success. Or as an organization, if you're making loans, is it that you're making small loans? So you're making micro loans and you want to graduate to mid-sized loans. How do you even define what loan size you're making? And how do you get the capital to make more? And frankly, again, what does your community need? If you're trying to make $5 million loans and nobody in the community can take that size, then how do you bring your size down to what the community can take? So again, since we're talking about the framework of new market tax credits, community development, and we're talking about organizational structures, what we're going to focus a little bit on now is how do we formalize. If we've got a new organization, you're either going to be a community loan fund, a CDE, a CDFI. Community development entities are certified by the CDFI fund. CDFIs go through a more rigorous certification process. So do you want to start off as a community loan fund? What kind of organization are you going to be? You really need to think about what organizational framework you need. Do you need some help with setting that framework up? And then again, where are you serving? Are you serving a really small region? Are you serving a neighborhood? Are you serving a region, or are you serving a state or the nation overall? Really think about how do you differentiate yourself with your products and your services? Again, talking about really small loans, is that what your niche is? And you're trying to then serve a larger area. Do you see that in your community, if you're doing those smaller loans, people are stumbling after they've gotten your funding and they don't have enough sort of oomph to get up the next hill so that they can get to that larger size? So do you really need to provide graduated loan sizing so that you're providing that next step in the ecosystem's growth pattern? If those businesses are getting off the ground, but they're not able to get to that next level because they don't have the capital. What do you have the track record of doing? So have you done a few loans and those have been successful, and now you want to get more formalized policies and procedures and think about how are you going to make sure that you're being good stewards of the money you have so that you can continue to make these loans? How do you make sure that they get paid back to you? What do you have the track record of funding? Do you know a business type? So if you have only been financing manufacturing, or you've only been financing community goods and services, or somebody that provides education, and you want to branch out, do you understand how to measure the success or the creditworthiness of different types of organizations? Again, pipeline really is another way of saying, what does your community need? Who is asking you for funding, and are you having to turn them down? And if you have to turn them down enough, does that mean you should figure out how to serve that need as well? Or frankly, should what you'd be doing is sort of creating a pipeline and a network to another organization that's serving that very need that you're being asked to serve? Community impact data, for us, this is a way of saying, what can we say about our community? What is the missing piece and the missing element of that community? What's performing, what's not performing? If we're starting from ground zero and we've got a community that's been wiped out perhaps by a storm, because we're having a lot of those nowadays, we need everything and we need it all right now. If we're talking about a community that has been shored up by, maybe there's an affordable housing community that's been put in there, or there's mixed use that's been in the community, but you really need early childhood education, or you really need access to healthcare. What is it that you need in your community? And again, what are you measuring? So if you really need in that community education, but you don't fund that, maybe that's a great partnership to create. If in that community, they really need a grocery store and you're really solid about how to get and finance grocery stores. Number one, if you know how to do that well, then you're really needed in a lot of communities. And number two, then you can maybe expand your service area and make it a little bit bigger. So again, management capacity and finance, those are really important elements. And oftentimes what I see a lot of organizations really investing in now is growing that leadership within, finding people who are within your organization already, giving them leadership training, helping them grow to the next level so that they can help your organization also grow to the next level. So as they're advancing in their career, they're advancing your organization as well. So help people feel like they're committed to your team and help them continue to grow within your organization. So there are some of the assessments we have to do and think about with team players. And then this is, again, a big one that dovetails on what I just said. Who's involved and when? If you just have the executive leadership team come up with a great plan, but you don't involve board members, will they support what you've said, or will they be moving in different directions? If you then involve key employees, but you don't really take account of the stakeholders outside of your company, are you going to be moving in lockstep with what's needed, or are you going to be moving in a different direction and find that you've moved in a way that the community isn't supportive, doesn't need, or you've sort of taken a mixed step? And then do you need experts or help? So again, if you're starting a new organization, do you need accountants? Do you need lawyers? Do you need somebody to do a charrette of your community? Do you need somebody to come in and do a deep dive and assessment of, hey, I think we've been doing this really great, but I don't really know what the pieces are missing in our puzzle. How do we sort of take all this disparate data? And this is sort of that idea of growing your circle. So if you start in one place, how do you expand that circle so that at the end of when you have everybody involved, everybody is moving in that lockstep direction towards your end goals? So I talked a little bit about data. One of the things that I think it's really important to get clear about is just saying data to people sometimes doesn't translate. There's qualitative and quantitative data. So there's numbers and then there's feelings. So we can have one great success story. And I often hear when I go around the country, people tell me about the thing that worked or the thing that didn't, right? So those can be really powerful stories. Those can be things that move people. They really resonate with us. They have a heart to them. But if that one story isn't really a great depiction of the many, then you may move in the wrong direction, right? You may have one really powerful statement. You may have one really powerful client success story or failure. And if you choose to move based on that one, but really everything else underlying your organization would suggest you should move in a different direction, you may make a big misstep. However, if you continue to think about data, even if you get started and you're going in the wrong direction, but you keep checking back in and you look at your data and say, oh, well, we made a miscalculation. We were moving with our passion and we weren't really following our data. But now that we see we've made a step in one direction, we can see that's the wrong step to be going. So that's really about who's going to measure it and how often. So if we get started on a big project, how often do you want to check back in? Checking back in too much becomes just another checklist to manage, and it sort of can become paralyzing, right? You have too much to manage. You can't really figure out which way to go. So people stop going altogether. If you're just trying to measure the data all the time, you don't have time to do. But if you don't take a measurement at all, then again, you'll find you've gone in the wrong direction, and you may have gone so far in the wrong direction. You have to, make up that time by really reformatting, and you've lost time and valuable resources. Also, getting everybody to go together really does involve, getting the team to go and having that passion and mission. And so if you set off on the wrong direction, you're going to have to go back to the whole team and make sure that you're getting them back on the same page so that they can get going in the right direction. This is a really great time to sort of think about what are some of the data points that other people are collecting. So when we're talking about lending, we can talk about the number of loans, we can talk about default rate, we can talk about the types of businesses financed, We can talk about the outcomes. And so, for example, depending on what type of lender, what type of mission you have, some of these may be more important than others. So traditional bank finance, they're really talking about volume, right? And they're talking about not having a high default rate. However, in some more community led lending, you may accept that a small, a slightly larger default rate may be required to do the lending you're going to do. You may have to take some of those risks that aren't being made by the traditional capital. How do you put more supports in place? How do you train the staff to understand what those risks are and to mitigate them? Again, sometimes we're trying to, in new market tax credits, we're trying to incentivize those bigger picture changes like targeted job creation or community services. Like we're trying to move the needle on the number of health outcomes, the number of people served, early education slots in childcare. So those are some things that you can think about measuring. So community lending and investing. These are some of the steps that you could think about. And again, what's right for you might not be right for everybody, but these are some of the next steps that you can think about. A certification process is something that may take you 6 to 9 months. And frankly, it depends on whether you already have an advisory board that really looks at your organization and helps you make sure what the community is needing is reflected within your organization. You may have to form a completely new entity depending on what kinds of loans or grants you're going to make. If you need a nonprofit to get grants and to transfer those into the community, you may need a nonprofit, then you may be a for-profit. Or if you are a nonprofit, but you want to get involved in new market tax credits or others, there may be a need to set up a separate entity, both for risk issues and also for just the requirements of each of these different types of funding programs. And again, sometimes you don't really need to do a new loan fund or a new CDE. You may just need to partner with another organization that's already doing what you really need to have done in your community. Maybe you expand to their community and provide your services that you provide, and you partner with another organization and they come into your community and provide the services they're providing, and you get to the same net end result of experts being able to provide what's needed within your service area. And again, partnership. Okay, so here's our roadmap. We're getting to the part where we're going to have our next polling question and talk about new markets coming up. But I just like this visual to help you think about, okay, we're on a linear path from where we are to where we want to go. We have to just sort of formulate our plan. We have to seek outside input to make sure that we are really making our plan fit within the service area we're trying to serve, and then we have to create those steps. So one of the things I sort of think back to in my region where I live is there's a community that has done a lot of different planning and nothing seems to take hold. And so there's that idea of that big picture. We're planning, but then how do you break that plan down? How do you create the next step so that we're all moving in the right direction? So those are the basics. And I think we're now up to our next polling question. Yeah, so what types of community development projects are you or your organization considering? Are you wanting to fund community facilities? Do you want to fund operating businesses, real estate development, green or sustainable initiatives, or other? You don't think about them in this term. So frankly, if you don't think about your lending or your borrowers or your plan in this fashion, check other and feel free to drop us a note in the chat. And after this poll, I will be turning it over to Jason, who will be leading you guys through some of the tools. Now that you've thought about the plan, sometimes the important thing to think about is who's going to pay for all of this and how do I get help with that piece of the puzzle. So Jason gets to do the fun part of talking with you guys about how to get the money. So it looks like a good fair amount of you do have an idea of the borrowers and broke down pretty evenly across those. And some, good 40% are thinking about that other. So we will turn it over to Jason to talk about how you can get some money for the different types of lending platforms. And thank you guys for joining us.
Thanks, Laurel. And I'm excited about those results. I think we've got a nice diverse group here. And so like Laurel said, we are going to transition a bit from kind of the high level strategic planning lens to look more closely at some real solutions that groups are looking at or using to get their projects either capitalized or their community development lending platform capitalized, and different ways that we can access capital to support their missions that Laurel really harped on before. So to start things off, really just want to acknowledge the fact that a lot of the community development programs really often rely on our governmental funding, governmental resources, which creates a set of challenges, right? Especially for newer projects and organizations whom haven't been in this space, and they may lack the institutional knowledge of some of the various programs and offerings that are out there. So want to kind of highlight a few of those things. A lot of these programs will have much bigger deep dives, especially with kind of the new tax reform bill and everything. There's much more you can learn about each of these, but these are kind of some of the high level things that our organizations that we work with are really focused on coming down the pipeline as ways that they are going to be able to drive their mission, vision, and value in communities. So on this slide, we see kind of some of the big community development provisions that came out of the tax reform bill. So we're going to highlight some of those major programs and the tax benefits there. So a great place to start is that tax reform bill, which affected some of the major community development tools driving those benefits. So the program that our strategic financing services team spends the bulk of our efforts on is the new market tax credit program. And we'll dive a bit more into that program specifically and the excitement around it being a permanent extension in the tax code in just a minute. But I did want to touch briefly on some of these others. So among the provisions in the tax reform bill was a permanent extension of the Opportunity Zones program. So with several modifications and enhancements to that program, there's a lot of nuance going on here. So I'm not going to cover all of the detail. We've got a whole nother Opportunity Zones webinar, I believe, coming up. So we have several other opportunities to learn about that. But for this group today, I would highlight that this is a great tool for economic development and job creation in distressed communities. The program really contains a lot of the elements from the new market tax credit model that we'll dive into here in a minute. In that investments in low-income community businesses must be made through an intermediary entity that and then held within that entity for an extended investment period. So unlike new market tax credits, the investment pool for these opportunity zones is theoretically, unlimited. There's no cap on these. So theoretically, there's opportunity for significantly more investment in this program. However, also unlike the new market tax credit program, not all low-income communities are necessarily eligible for investments. Only a subset of those communities. So 25% of the census tracts that are eligible for new market investment may then be designated by states as opportunity zones. And that's the key point, that it's really up to the states to make those policy determinations. So the tax reform bill makes the OZ program permanent, but opportunity zones will now have this 10-year rolling designation as an opportunity zone, with really an increased focus on rural areas coming down the pipeline as well. So big takeaway for opportunity zones here is that beginning in July of 2026, governors will be able to start nominating those 25% portions of their eligible census tracts in their state as opportunity zones. And then in late 2026, I would expect that the Department of Treasury to complete that designation process. So we're looking at really 2027. And so we're kind of looking at a dead period really for opportunity zone investment in 2026 and waiting for those benefits to take effect, and those changes in benefits to take effect into 2027. So I would also note that it takes to be an opportunity zone is becoming a little bit more stringent moving forward as well. So they're moving from an 80% of area or statewide median family income threshold to 70% of median family income, which will allow for more investments in the areas that are, the most underserved. So, okay, that was a lot on opportunity zones. And as I mentioned, there's just a lot more to know there. So if you do have questions, please reach out. Another change for community development activity in the bill that I just want to highlight real quickly is for the low-income housing tax credit, which saw really major changes, including a permanent increase to LIHTC state credit caps and various other favorable changes, including increased access to the 4% LIHTC threshold, and those changes will begin in 2026. And just maybe on a programming note, while I continue to call these changes permanent, anyone following the news knows that nothing in the tax code is truly permanent. Really, we just don't need to extend these and authorize them annually. So it's a huge step forward for all of these programs, but permanency is really up to Congress in the next administration. All right, so now we are going to go into the new market tax credit, which is, as we've mentioned a few times, kind of near and dear to our strategic financing services team's heart. It can really be an overlooked tool. I think the new market tax credit has a perception of complexity and various other barriers to entry with institutional knowledge that I think really maybe scare people away just a little bit. So hopefully we can debunk some of that here. So the new market program has been around since 2000, and it was, just like the OZ program, it was modeled off a program before it, right? It was modeled off the low-income housing tax credit program. The NMTC program then aims to advance capital to economically distressed communities, driving capital into areas where there's a perceived investment risk, right? As that area has a limited capital investment in the past, and it's difficult to obtain capital in that area. So it does this by issuing tax credit allocation to community development entities, or CDEs, as I'll call them throughout the presentation, whom kind of then deploy the tax credits into high impact projects. Think job creation, community services, a lot of those targeted impacts that Laurel mentioned earlier. So as I mentioned a couple slides ago, the new market tax credit program received permanent status in the tax reform legislation. Previously, the program was being reauthorized by Congress, and that this permanency really allows for some much needed stability in the program. The NMTC relies on private capital and institutional investment into the program. So permanency removes a lot of that uncertainty around the program that I'm really optimistic will encourage even more institutional investment into the institutional investors into the program, driving even better outcomes for the underserved communities. So while permanence of the program is very exciting, we are also currently in the middle of more exciting news coming up in the middle of an award announcement cycle. So the round 21 award applications were due earlier this year, and we're expecting those announcements of the winners of that round this fall. So this round is actually covering 2 rounds. So they will be announcing tax credit authority for $10 billion in new market tax credits. Historically, a certain amount of that allocation has also been required to be deployed in order to apply for the next round that we now have authorization for. So the more allocation in the next round. So if that holds true for this round, which I would suspect it is, we could see community development entities really needing to deploy a significant amount of allocation in really a short period of time to be eligible to apply for the next round. So, and a lot of that allocation is probably earmarked for projects already, but many of those projects have already been identified, like I said, but CDEs will be looking for projects. So it's an exciting time to be learning about and getting in the market space. A little bit more background on kind of the mechanics of the program. As a reminder, the CDFI fund relies on these CDEs as the intermediaries, which makes this program really unique and community impact focused. Utilizing the local knowledge of those CDEs or CDFIs and expertise of those entities to decide what's the best use of the allocation and have them monitor the program. It would be to provide the best impact to the underserved communities. So CDEs will submit applications to the CDFI fund in a competitive process, and those will be reviewed and scored. We have a future webinar coming up, as Laurel mentioned, that dives into the application process and changes in the recent application. That's coming up here next month in September. So if that's of particular interest to you, I would definitely tune into that. But just to highlight how competitive the process can be, the 5 billion round of round 20 awards that were announced last fall included applications from nearly 200 applicants, and around 100 received varying sizes of allocation authority. So while there are lots of CDEs applying for this really coveted allocation, only around 50–60% are receiving any sort of award annually. All right, so the next slide. So we've got a lot going on here, kind of a little bit of a new markets tax credit 101, but I think it's important to keep in mind that CDEs are not receiving millions of dollars in cash from the CDFI. These CDEs are receiving the authority to allocate tax credits to investors. But here, a quick rundown of the math. The new market tax credit is a 39% tax credit. So that is, for every dollar of allocation authority that the CDE has, they can generate that 39 cents of tax credits. So investors, think about, large commercial banks that have substantial tax liability. They'll invest in these projects in order to receive that dollar for dollar reduction on their federal income tax liability through purchasing the credits. So currently, investors pay at a market rate. So for these credits, that rate fluctuates over time. Currently, we're around 81 cents. I think we have 81 cents in the calculation here on the dollar to purchase the credits. So the key concept to grasp here is the new market tax credit is not meant to cover all of the costs of the project. Rather, it brings that investor equity at the top there in to cover the last financing gap, around 20–25% of the project. So you can see in this example, the leveraged lenders in the top left here of our diagram at the top of the structure represent the capital already committed, right? Whether it's cash that your project has on hand, any standard commercial debt that it's already acquired or is planning on taking on, or any sort of future grants or equity proceeds. So everything that it's already got comes in that leverage lender piece, and then the investor equity comes in to kind of be that gap filler. So a great part of the new market program is for the projects is that those funds and benefits really are derived upfront at closing. So this slide is really a great illustration of how those proceeds fit into an existing capital stack. So the cost of capital for projects in lower income, underserved communities really makes it difficult, right? So it makes it difficult to find enough sources to make businesses in those areas feasible. So one solution to this cost of capital problem is the new market tax credit, which can provide a new source of capital that takes the overall cost of capital on the project from really unfeasible to feasible. So looking at our skyscraper example here, the bulk of the project might be financed by traditional third-party or senior level debt that can be extremely limited in a new market eligible census tract, or it's simply too expensive for a manufacturing business to take that debt on in that area. So projects can stall out waiting for banks to make decisions or find enough equity at kind of this level. And a project that can secure a new market tax credit allocation can look considerably more attractive now to third-party investors or creditors, and more feasible to keep that investment in underserved area. All right, another wrinkle to the new market tax credit program is its competitive nature. So we talked about the CDE's competitiveness in applying for the allocation. Simply having a qualified project in general is also not enough. And there is kind of more demand for the incentive than is actually available. So as I mentioned, that is where the CDEs come in, and they act as that intermediary to determine the best projects. And being a CDE can really be a benefit for a lot of community development corporations, CDFIs, lenders who are looking for additional capital themselves. The CDFI fund allows these CDEs to generate fee revenue and other sorts of asset management fee revenue through taking on this program and being that intermediary. But still, it really starts before any of that. As the CDE applies for allocation, the CDFI fund is going to review those CDE applications or allocations and see what projects are being proposed. So this slide, it's a bit bit small, but is powerful illustration of what projects are receiving new market tax credit allocation. As you can see, since 2023, the primary NMTC project types, really more than 60% have gone to manufacturing, healthcare. You throw in nonprofit hubs in there, and that's 60% of the allocation over the last few years. But then looking at the top left here in this graph, it shows how that's really changed drastically since the program's inception. In the early days, a lot of hotels, tourism, mixed use projects were getting done. And, that was in 2000, 2003. Obviously the world has changed quite a bit since then, but there's really been a shift to, manufacturing and healthcare over the last, 10 years or so that really has been the primary source for new market tax credit allocation. And where do projects receive funding? So this is an illustration showing kind of what states since 2023 have been doing projects. So as you can see, California, Texas, New York, Florida, the top of the list there, as you would expect, but of note, California and Florida are considered underserved states for the new market tax credit program. And probably part of the reason that they're getting some more investment. They're underserved in the fact that they've got a larger percentage of low-income persons to the dollars of new market tax credits that have been invested in those areas. But you can see projects are getting done all over the nation, all over the country, and from Hawaii to Alaska, and there's even a Puerto Rico project on the list here over the last couple of years. And so every state, I believe, is represented. All right, so that was pretty quick on the new market tax credit program. Please reach out with questions. Our team is always looking to discuss the program and where it's headed. So don't be shy. I'm going to kind of change gears just slightly here for the end of our presentation to just really quickly talk about what other ways projects and community development corporations can capitalize their business or lending platforms. So I've really harped on NMTCs being that last piece of the capital stack. But how do we come up with those other pieces, right? There's really no way to kind of summarize all the various ways that projects can bring in the capital, or lenders can identify ways to bring in capital. A lot of it takes some level of creativity and goes back to kind of all the strategic planning in Laurel's section below, asking those questions of your organization and partnership. I think, as Laurel said earlier, what organizations are you collaborating with? Who can you better network with? And do those organizations and individuals' missions align with yours? It just can't be harped on enough. If I'm a entity that's looking to do community development lending or investing, I need to find capital sources that align with that mission. And you can do that in various ways. I think traditionally CDFIs have had a great partnership with institutional investors and banks as a way to finance capital. The CDFI fund has various programs that get utilized frequently to help generate capital into those low-income communities. Philanthropic organizations and individuals are obviously a source. But you've got to really take the time to go through that strategic planning that Laurel talked about and decide who can we look to help us with our funding gap situation. So here are some more of the CFI fund grant programs. Mentioned a few of these already in the new market tax credit. Many of the CDEs we talked about, the 200 that applied are also CFIs. CFIs are automatically community development entities and can provide that lending and capitalization through these programs. If you are a project looking to do a capital project in that low-income area, finding the CDFIs in your area or nationally and getting your ideas in front of them now is a great next step. The CDFI fund really has a numerous number of programs beyond the new market tax credit that we discussed. And, it may be even better for your organization. The NMTC program is really designed for larger projects with capital spend of at least 8 million and oftentimes more than 10 million. So getting connected with CDFI professionals that can help you to navigate these programs is really a great resource that many are really not taking advantage of. And I think it's a great next step for many organizations thinking about the strategic planning phase. So perhaps you are a community development corporation or another organization that is currently providing that lending and that investment resource. The CDFI fund offers a technical assistance grant that can be a really great way to help propel your organization towards CDFI fund certification. So that technical assistance grant can pay for consultants, it can pay for anything that you can think of to get you up and going to become a CDFI. So if you've been doing some community development lending and you're thinking CDFI fund is certification is the next step for you, I really encourage you to learn more about the technical assistance program. It's a great resource that's out there for aspiring CDFIs. Kind of touched on technical assistance grants already. Capital Magnet Fund, real quick. If you're, it's another competitive grant program. If you are considering affordable housing development of any kind or lending, you should get yourself acquainted with that as well. And then, the last slide that I'll really kind of talk about here really goes back to the strategic planning that Laurel was talking about earlier. After you've identified those collaborating partners and investors, being able to communicate the need is vital. Just telling funders that you're hopeful that you've got, additional funding sources coming in is not going to get everyone excited to commit to your project. So, assessing your revenue considerations, making a list of all of those confirmed and potential sources of capital or revenue is really a great first step. Identifying the gaps in the funding you have, if you don't have enough funding, where is that gap coming from? How can you identify potential, even just potential ways that you can fill those gaps, and kind of establishing that narrative for your funding needs? I think those things are the key things that you want to go to the funders with. Other funder considerations, how aligned are you with the funder's track record? Laurel talked a lot earlier about track record and being aligned with your partners. It just can't be talked about enough, though. If I'm going to a mid-sized bank and asking them to support my CDFI fund lending platform that is focused on healthcare lending, and they haven't really done any healthcare lending at all on their own, it's going to be a tougher sell. You need to be able to identify the different institutional funders that you might align with. And so there's lots of great resources from CDFIs, and CDFIs will talk to you and point you in the right direction as well. So other things, what types of projects or entities, have they funded in the past? What amounts do they historically provide? If you're asking for, $1 million and they've really only given out smaller grant or loan funds, that's not going to be a tough sell. And what's your relationship with the funder? That's really what it comes down to. Do you have they already provided you with capital, and are they going to be interested in providing you with more capital if the capital you've received from them isn't deployed yet, or is still in the construction phase, or any of those various situations? So just some things to consider as we're going to funders asking for capital. Make sure you have everything strategically aligned. I think that takes us to our final polling question. Do you want someone from Cherry Beckert to reach out to you about the topics we discussed today? And as we launch that, I will turn things back over to Laurel to get us out of here today.
Well, thank you guys for joining us. This is the kind of work we do across the country, and we really enjoy talking with groups to kind of get a sense of where they are and where they want to go and help them put together a plan. But it is something that you can do a lot of these steps on your own by really being thoughtful, gauging your community, and figuring out who you should be working with and how to bring them along on that journey with you. So that last polling question will give you guys some time to make sure you get your answer in, get credit for the CPE. But just want to take this opportunity to thank you for spending your time with us. We know you all have so many different demands on your time, and we hope we've provided some valuable insights to help you along your way. If we can be of any assistance and you'd like to reach out, please feel free to do that. We've got both of our contact information here in the slides. And frankly, this is just something we really are passionate about doing. So if you've got a question, just reach out and we will be happy to talk with you. We've gotten you to more than 50 minutes, so you get your 1 hour credit for those of you who are here for the CPE. And for those of you who are here on your journey, we wish you well. Hope you'll join us on our next session. Talk to you later.